Good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning for this AMA with our Sovrn support engineering team. My name is Hillary, and I'm the community manager here at Sovrn. Excuse me. Thank you so much for all of you that have asked us questions on the community thread. The team here is going to be answering those questions now within the next hour. If you have questions that come up that have not already been asked, feel free to post them in the YouTube comment box or on our social media channels. So some introductions here, starting from the left. We have Luke, Eric Conrad, Michael Wilson, Anna, Ted, and Wes. And we'll just let them get started.
Cool. Okay. Question number one. Asked by Alex. What is the deal with Ads.txt? I have no idea.
No, me neither. Yeah, what is that thing? It's a mystery doll.
Now, Ads.txt is a simple verification tool used by DSPs, which are buy-side platforms, to verify that exchanges and SSPs and the publishers on those exchanges and SSPs have permission from site owners to present their inventory for sale. The goal of it is to reduce fraudulent resale of traffic. That's it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of publishers asking, you know, what kind of tangible gains can we get from Ads.txt? And I think right now it's kind of too early to say exactly what that is, but it's always good to keep up. The next question here is from Jordan G Unit. How do I know? So he, you know, Sovrn has this server-side config where any publisher can come on and like set up their header bidding code, and you probably heard about it from your publisher advocate or whoever's managing your account here at Sovrn. And a good question that comes up a lot is like, how do I know that header bidding is a good idea for my site? Like, where am I at in the process? And you know, I think last year when header bidding was really exploding, everyone was like, you know, no matter what, you should always set up header bidding. Like, you're gonna make more money, and that's definitely true. But I think what we've learned a lot from setting up so many different sites with this stuff and you know, seeing the gains that come from it is having a stable setup that's working and, you know, working through DFP, working the way that you understand that's also effective. That's really the primary thing that you want to have. Like, if you don't really have a good DFP setup, you know, you're like coming into it with like hard-coded tags, you're not going to get as much out of it. And I think, like, you know, it's going to take us, you know, helping you set it up a lot longer in that situation. So yeah, I would say get DFP set up, get your waterfall and VET tags set up in DFP with AdSense, AdX backfill. And then the other thing is, like, you really want to have a couple partners before you think about making that switch. You know, like, we always say that header bidding is going to increase yield no matter if it's just Sovrn or if there's multiple partners. And that's definitely true, but at the same time, with header bidding, you're really turning the waterfall sideways. And if you just have one partner, that's really not going to change a whole lot. You're still going to be able to get those higher CPM bids, but you're not going to have people driving, multiple bidders driving that price up. So yeah, those are the two things that I would say.
Nice. Kind of to that same point, our next question talks more about our header complete solution. So those of you who are using it or haven't heard about it, header complete is our server-side configuration solution that we provide here. So this question just kind of asks, what's the difference or what are the benefits to our server-side configuration solution versus just any other kind of header bidding auction with client-side implementations? So I think that one of the biggest positives to our header complete solution is that it's all handled and manipulated within your Meridian user interface. So really all you have to do is take one piece of code and place it onto the page, and then once it's there, you don't really have to touch it or mess with it anytime after that. If you want to add partners, if you want to change your parameters, anything like that, that's all handled within Meridian. So you don't have to touch code on page, and that's really helpful from a technical standpoint, and also from a latency standpoint, it helps to have less code on the page. Also with the server side aspect of it, we can collect a lot more data to help you troubleshoot different aspects of your setup, whether or not how your partners are performing, different kind of things like that. I think we'll talk a little bit more about our pre-bid kind of adapter in a little bit, but the entire header complete solution is built off of pre-bid, so it's completely from that open source solution. And I think that the more implementations we do, I think everyone can speak to this, but the more implementations we do, we kind of realize the simpler, the better, and the more structurally sound your setup is going to be, the easier it is for anybody to troubleshoot and your partners to perform. Do you guys think that that's?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think especially with the fact that all the inputs for server-side config have been tested to work. You know, you're not like actually working with the code where you could have little syntax errors that, you know, are really hard to find down the road.
Sweet.
All right, cool. So, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we had a live question come through. So to revert back to Ads.txt, I guess, for 1 second.
Sweet.
Soy Medicina wants to know if with the Ads.txt, if the Ads.txt will help to get a better CPM or more impressions.
Yeah, there's actually a question further down that asks that same question.
Should we jump to it? Or do you want to
Yeah,
wait?
let's do it.
We can jump to it. So you just basically asked it. So as DSPs adopt this verification method, it's a pretty steady adoption rate, and there's varying degrees at which they adhere to it. But as they adopt it and adopt it more strictly, publishers without an ads.txt file or incorrect ads.txt files will see a steady decline in fill rates and CPM because more DSPs will be looking at it. So that's the simple answer there. So at this point, a lot of DSPs aren't currently doing it, and some are doing it at a low degree just to kind of test the waters. But in the near future, as more DSPs are doing it, because it actually works as an effective way to cut out a lot of fraud, because it eliminates a lot of the room to where the fraudulent players work. Yeah, I think publishers that right now it's worse to be inaccurate than to not have it. But in the future, you're going to have accurate, and you're definitely going to want to have it on your page.
Thanks. Sorry, Wes.
That's okay. Yeah, and I think with the ads.txt file, I mean, it seems like it's simple enough and straightforward enough. Like, just throw it on there. You know what I mean?
It's very simple.
So one of the questions we have here is, at what point do you find publishers having diminished returns partner-wise in their wrapper? And for a scaling publisher, how many demand sources would you recommend? So on the pre-bid documentation, they say to have 1 to 5 demand partners, and really this question is about the diminishing returns is about latency and how long you're willing to have the ad server wait for all the bids from the header auction to return. So pre-bid recommends 1 to 5, like right off the bat, but then they also discuss that they also have a page where they talk about you can have up to 10 partners, depending on the balance that you want to make with waiting for having the ad server wait for all the bids to return. So it's a balance between, you know, how fast your page already is, and how long you're willing to wait, basically. So it's a little bit of balance there, but obviously you make more money when you add more bidders, but you also start losing money if the ads take too long to load. So it's a small balance. I would say go ahead and throw 5 on there, you know, at least, and get running with that. And then you can experiment more with adding more depending on your page.
Are there any trends that we've seen as far as number of partners? That seems to be kind of a sweet spot. You guys know?
I mean, I would say a lot of our most successful partners are between 6 and 8. I think. What did you say about?
Yeah, I agree.
6 being the number of like concurrent requests.
Yeah. So the restraint is with the browser and how many connections it can make. So Having more than 5, it's gonna take longer. You have to have your ad server wait longer for all the bids to return. That's basically what it comes down to, but I don't think 5 on there.
I think it's
sure.
important to note that like not everyone's the same in that regard. Like different partners have different timeouts. Certain partners will even tell you to adjust your timeouts for them. So, looking out for that kind of stuff, kind of feeling out like what do people think about like the latency associated with partner X, and just kind of think about it that way. Think about the other factors on your site that produce latency too.
Yeah, the only way that more bidders is going to help you is if you have the ad server wait longer.
Cool. The second part to Policy's question is for scaling publishers, are you seeing a shift towards server-side auctions, or do you think client-side will remain the most popular in the next year, or hybrid models? That's a good question. I think that server-side will be more popular in the next year. I don't know if it will be more popular than client. Because I mean, server-side is there's less connections to happen and it's a little bit quicker if it's done right. He asked hybrid models. I think from us, we would suggest hybrid models like as you make a transition to server-side, you can set up some of your tags being called through servers with a server-side auction and the others with client, and we can see which one performs better, and then we can move you over towards whichever one performs better. I'm a big proponent of server-side, like for the long run, but I think in the near future, client-side will still be like the predominant way to do it. Any thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, I think the important thing with the hybrids is some of the partners that publishers will have will work better client side, some will work better server side. So having that ability to keep the better performing ones in their better respective client or server is huge.
Yeah, and a lot of things can affect that. I mean, I think where your traffic's coming from and where your servers are. I mean, just that latency, could affect it. One thing that is coming out soon for us is there's already a pre-bid server-side solution, so you can use like pre-bid with your server-side auction. And like client-side pre-bid, you need to have an adapter for each partner. Our adapter hasn't been approved yet on the GitHub repo. So we're expecting our adapter to be approved and that up and going by the end of like next month, maybe beginning of April. So once that's going, I think we'll see a shift towards server. So that's exciting.
I think that also kind of speaks to like whether it's server side, client side, like the complexity of your customized wrapper, how much you really shift from any kind of, like if you're focusing on pre-bid, if you shift from that open source too much, you can really cater to your site in terms of knowing your users and knowing your performance and like heighten that a lot. But if you get too complicated or too complex, it can really start to mess with how your publishers or how your partners perform and just how like, the overall environment kind of shifts. I don't know that there's necessarily a sweet spot there, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got to wait and see. I think you're totally right. Like, I think the thing that's scaring a lot of publishers away is that there's so few partners in pre-bid server right now. So I think as more partners like Sovrn get into the mix there, it's going to be really interesting to see. Because, Luke, I remember we were looking at it. It's really easy to just kind of add a server-side partner through pre-bid and then run everyone else client-side in the same wrapper, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We did have another question come through. So Eduardo Stott asks, he says, I'm a small ad network with 4 sites. I want to use header bidding, but but he wants to configure it in DFP and not within each publisher. So do we have a solution for that, for a small ad network wanting to use header bidding?
What, through a single DFP account?
Seems like it.
Yeah, I mean, single DFP account is totally fine. We have tons of publishers that have multiple sites in one account. You can even use the same line items for all the sites. I think we would all definitely recommend using different ad units for each of the sites. I think it just gives you a better idea of if things are working. But yeah, one account I think is actually really preferable from a development standpoint too.
Yeah, and what Ted is saying with different ad units for each site, that'll give you a lot more granularity with reporting, so you can see which site's making you money. If you make it more granular, like to where we have different ad units on different pages on the site, you can see which page is making money, if you're curious about that.
I think he just commented back and said he wants to work with 2 DFPs. So I guess, does that change things?
Nope, you could definitely work with 2 different DFP accounts if you want to, depending on how you want to break out your sites. I think that reporting wise, if you're trying to report on all 4, it could get a little bit more complicated in terms of pulling those and combining the reports, but however you want to break it out is completely fine. A DFP can get really complicated, and there's a lot that you can do within DFP to fit your specific needs. And so there are some times when whatever works best for you, a DFP can definitely handle it.
Cool, thanks.
All right, next. It would just be a matter of making, however many line items you're making in both, which is usually the constraint that people have is creating the line items for header bidding, which we can always help with. If someone wants to reach out and have us create their line items for them.
Yeah, we do that. We're good at that.
Yeah, the way we do that is you give us access to the DFP account, and then we can go in there and create whatever line items you want and set it up or help you do whatever you need to do.
All right, cool. Next question. All right, so this is a long one. Bear with me, guys. What would you say sets Sovrn apart from the glut of ad tech vendors, exchanges, and ad networks that seem to be always be reserving their best efforts for the big websites on the internet? Examples here and then ESPN, New York Times, etc. These, incidentally, are all websites that seem to be struggling with keeping the lights on in the first place. Seems like there's got to be a different or more effective way to help websites navigate through the changes going on in the advertising business. All right, so in summary, what sets Sovrn apart? I'll say first and foremost, we view our publishers as business partners as opposed to just a client. Our main focus on our team and across the organization is publisher success, not just slinging ads onto people's websites. In addition to that, we also have a community where you can directly communicate with us and all the other smart people we work with, who can like fill you in what's going on, like push you in the right direction, give you advice. And within that community, we also have articles about industry trends, like new things coming up. If you're confused about Ads.txt, like we just had an article about that. Yeah, we do, confirmed. And I mean, that's a great place to keep up with industry trends, ask questions, as I said before. That URL is community.sovrn.com. And if you have any questions, hit us up there. We'll take a look and help you out there. So I'd say that's what sets Sovrn apart the most is we're way more focused on publisher success.
I think that we're also working to build out a lot of different solutions outside of just the specific ad tech, piece of what we do in terms of, providing services to our publishers who need help with
Email hashing.
Yeah, email hashing or managing all of their DFP accounts, all of your different partners. We're working on different adapters that will allow you to pull reports from Prebid. And I think that where we really thrive is that we don't have any size limits for our publishers, and we can really run the gamut from a really small publisher to a scaling publisher and help you manipulate your setup as best works for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Michael said about us being, publisher centric, is really important in that, we know that the way that you're going to be the most successful, and therefore that we would be the most successful, is for you to make as much money as possible. And that doesn't always mean making as much as possible through Sovrn. So we really give you solutions that allow you to optimize overall yields, become a larger website, get those resources to get you off the ground. And both sides win in that situation. The next question we have is from Ryan Snopes. What is Sovrn's view on publishers who use Sovrn demand directly integrated through the header and also via tag-based third-party vendors who provide publishers with Sovrn reseller Ads.txt entries? Does using both Sovrn directly and as a reseller put the publisher direct seat at a disadvantage, as the buy side could potentially have access to the same impressions through a cheaper supply path via the reseller? That's a really, really interesting question. I think this is something that's become so common in the industry that it's impossible to say a general thought there. There's so many different types of resellers, like widgets, other kinds of additive inventory like VET, which is, well, VET is not one, but like the same kind of idea where they're offering something beyond the normal scope of the ad stack, money that you wouldn't already have. The other reason that, it's tough to say it's always a bad idea to go through a reseller is that they oftentimes have really functional tech that makes them really, really appealing to a smaller publisher. We can, as support engineers, like we help you get there from more of like an open pre-bid kind of perspective. But having that one tag solution as a small publisher can be a lot easier than having that kind of code base to overcome there. And sometimes when you get to the point where you want to set up your own stuff, it's not always easy to pull out that reseller's product and have the same overall ad stack. So we've done a ton of different implementations, and I think we've all seen a lot of this, and we've seen enough of it to see totally different outcomes. And I think that the two rules of thumb here is, if it's working, don't fix it. Like if something's working well for you, makes sense to you, the page is loading properly, why go and try and
That's a good point.
Why go and try and fix it? And then if it isn't working, and if anyone else has other opinions on this, you can say something, but I would say pick one or the other if you're not having success, and don't keep trying to force both, because a lot of times in those situations, like the open wrapper that you're trying to use or publisher direct implementation is somehow interfering with what you had set up through the reseller, either through like global variable names that are the same. If both of you are using like the same variable name for a pre-bid, for example, like one is going to overwrite the other, and essentially cancel the first one. And with how the browser works, that could be have totally different results from request to request. So I would just say, those two rules of thumb are really smart in that situation.
Conrad, I guess we can answer that one already, right? The next one about ads.txt?
Let's see. A farm media asks, does the text file actually do anything? Does it block unauthorized sellers from selling a publisher's inventory? And how will this impact fill rates? And yes, I kind of answered it, but the big takeaways there are adoption rates by DSPs are steadily increasing, and as they do, publishers without or with incorrect Ads.txt files will see a decline in performance. At this point in time, it's better to have no ads.txt and incorrect, but in the very near future, you're going to want to see ads.txt files on your publisher sites or on your sites to ensure that DSPs know that we are able to represent your inventory.
Great.
Okay, cool. So the next question, are there any tips on how we should target Sovrn tags in DFP, specifically geo-targeting, device browser targeting, frequency capping? In Meridian, I don't see a breakdown by geo, only by US and other. Is there any data or report that I can pull to show performance by geo? Yeah, so Anna kind of worked on this question a little bit already on the community, so you might be able to help me out with this. But specifically for geo, through DFP, you can use their built-in queries that they have in the report section. So if you go to the reports in DFP and then go to the queries section, and then there's a section called system queries, which has some built-in reports ready for you already. And one of them is network geography report. So that's a real good, easy place to start. You can pull that report. And then there's also a device and browser report there. So I would start there. And then if you need more granularity than that, you can write your own custom query. But DFP has geography and device and browser ready to go. And then, Anna, I was hoping you could maybe help me out with this one, because the frequency capping, for me, I don't understand why you would put a frequency cap on the remnant line items, but I don't know. Is there some sort of reason that you would want to add a frequency cap to a remnant line item?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that some of us might agree to disagree down the line, and it just depends on you as a publisher, I guess. So like I kind of mentioned in the post yesterday, frequency capping within DFP was originally meant for your guaranteed and direct line items, essentially to ensure that guaranteed and repetitive creatives weren't being served to the same person multiple times. So you put a frequency cap on it so that you can better distribute your guaranteed inventory across all of your readers. People kind of started using frequency capping at their price priority line items to kind of hit the very top of your CPM. So in terms of, I guess it just really depends on how many partners you're running and whether or not frequency capping your top partners will actually create that much of a difference for you. At the end of the day, it's going to depend, and maybe it won't. But if you do put a frequency cap on some of your top partners, then you can kind of ensure that that partner is seeing the top of your inventory, therefore paying the most amount of money for your highest readers, your most unique readers. And then, like I said in the post yesterday, I would also create a secondary tag for that partner to place deeper within your stack, so that that same partner, whether it's Sovrn or whoever, can get an idea of your mid-level inventory as well. I think it depends on how much traffic you have, whether or not that's actually going to be useful. But frequency capping at the top might just allow you to get some of those higher CPMs at the end of the day. And it might not, Wes. I think you're right. It definitely depends on the partner, and I don't think that that's ever what frequency capping was necessarily meant for.
And didn't you say that some publishers use it to kind of test partners in different positions in the waterfall?
Yeah, we used to talk to some of our larger publishers who were nervous kind of maybe about manipulating their stack, or they weren't sure how well Sovrn was going to perform, and we could say, okay, give us a chance at the top, give us a small frequency cap, so that you don't have a large chance of losing out on a lot of inventory at the top. If we don't perform well, you can do this with any partner, but yeah, that's a really good point. It could be really good for testing, just to say, hey, are these guys actually going to perform if I give them the top of the stack? If not, we can just kind of shift them down to the bottom. But yeah, that's a really good point too. And I think that kind of answers that second piece of the question that I was going to focus on also. Was there anything that I missed? Since I'm fine.
Astute.
Sweet.
I like the idea of doing some A/B testing with the frequency cap. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think in general, Anna has a little more experience working directly with the publishers, which is awesome. But you guys all watching this are publishers, and you guys have a probably a better picture of what that does. When I saw that question, I was like, I don't really understand why you would frequency cap programmatic. But after talking about it with a couple other people, it seems like something that people definitely do as kind of a performance consideration. So yeah, let us know your thoughts there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, the next question is why or why not is it advantageous to run Sovrn or any other partner on a client-side wrapper and via third-party S2S, the example is Google EBDA, simultaneously? Many publishers report seeing incremental lift from combined implementations. What is the reason for the lift? Is the Google EB option being primed by the results of the client-side option? Okay, there's a few questions here. Many of the publishers report seeing incremental lift from combined implementations. What is the reason for the lift? I don't think the reason for the lift is probably the combined implementation. It probably, if you switch half your tags to Google EBDA and that's working better for you, you will see a lift because those half are working better. There's really not a reason why together they will work better. The question is Google EBDA option being primed by the results of the client-side option? No, it is not. So why we would suggest a combination is to see which is working better for you, because for different people or for different publishers, one probably will work better than the other. Like I mentioned before, a big part of it would be for Google EBDA especially, there's timeouts and issues. So depending on where your traffic is coming from and where the servers are, that can add like enough a latency to cause you to timeout. But we would suggest the combined implementations just to see which one works better, and then probably move to one or the other. Is my answer to that question. Anybody else have any thoughts?
No, I think a lot of these questions people probably want like definite answers, like what's the answer there, and I think it's hard when you hear a lot of like, well, it's a lot of A/B testing, but really at the end of the day, EBDA is a different implementation of the same basic tech, and a lot of times the success of a given piece of tech can really vary a lot from site to site.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think we're really good at helping publishers do the A/B testing. Like we can help them with giving them reports and our Meridian's like up to date. Like we can run tags for a couple days and then pull reports and have really accurate reporting. So we're available to help with any of these implementations.
We got a couple more questions that came through. One is basically asking about performance in Latin America. And so knowing that performance differs by geo and every publisher, can you guys speak to that quickly?
I think that's something we've been trying to work with as we continue to build out our Latin American publishers. And again, like Ted said, I wish I had like a very specific, correct answer to give, but I think that the more traffic we see coming through, the better we're able to analyze how our demand is going to perform, and the better we can communicate to our demand partners in terms of that kind of traffic and what they should be bidding and what we should be seeing from different geos. I think that we have a demand team really focused on that communication right now and working to increase our performance with Latin American publishers and getting it to a very comparable place with our US traffic. And what else do you think?
I mean, I think it's funny that, or it's like interesting to me that, you know, up until like now and even still now, like most of the things that people do is regarding geos is like US versus everybody else. Especially with like breaking out different tags. And for a lot of the publishers that we have in these geos outside the US, it's like, okay, so we're an outside of the US geo, but how do we as like in the Latin American geo compare to you know, someone in the UK, or there's so many other countries besides the US that, you know, getting more data on other countries and seeing where the CPMs are in each of those countries and how they're trending is really going to be a big initiative as people starting to broaden the scope of programmatic advertising.
We did have one more. Inside the Hall asked, in your opinion, what is the site performance impact of using header bidding versus just using this standard Sovrn tags?
I think Ted kind of talked to that at the beginning, right? But just it's got to depend on your site, the amount of traffic that you're getting. I think that, like Ted pointed out, last year header bidding was such the buzzword, and everyone, you know, every single publisher should always implement it. You're 100% going to make more money. And I don't know, what do you guys think?
I mean, I guess it's like, it's true if everything's working right, but there's so many considerations there. I would say, you know, I feel like I've heard the number like 40% of like a, you know, single partner addition, like just Sovrn. But I mean, I really think it depends on how exactly you're implementing the standalone tags and how you're implementing header bidding.
Yeah, I feel like there's a kind of a slight trade-off where header bidding might take us slightly longer, but overall you're making more money. That's kind of the way I view it. But again, it all depends on how your site's set up, if there's already latency involved, etc.
Whether or not you have an ad server, how you're actually going to be
Yeah, good point.
implementing.
All right, next question. All right, how does win rate affect your header bidding algorithm? If bids are requested on a size mapped or lazy loaded ad unit that may never get sent to the ad server, does your algorithm penalize this behavior? What about bid caching? So a couple questions there. I kind of interpret the first one as if we request an ad, but there's no place for it to go, how does that affect bidding? And the question of that, I mean, the answer to that is we aren't totally sure because that's on the demand side. But what we can say is that we have observed that sites with a 1-to-1 ratio between ads requested and slots to serve into perform better. So that would indicate to me that there might, like some demand partners might have a flag set up where if they're not winning at all, or if it detects slots or like bids requested with no slots to go into, like it'll flag that and probably devalue it. So we highly recommend having your setup 1-to-1 as requested the slots on page. In addition to that, having that type of setup with too many requests will affect your fill rate. It'll make your fill rate abysmal, and that's we get a lot of cases in here where like the fill rate's terrible, and it's because people are requesting every ad on their website on every page load. So they're requesting 20 ads for like 5 slots on each page, and that's no good. So if you want like better reporting and like a better idea of how you're performing, like set it 1-to-1. And then in terms of bid caching, that's been an issue that we've come across a few times. And that's usually in lazy loaded setups. And logically speaking, it makes a lot of sense to request all of your ads at the initial page load. But what happens is if it takes too long for the user to scroll down to that ad unit for that previously requested ad to be served into that slot, there's a chance that the impression has timed out by then. Meaning your ad server might record that as an impression because it went through the whole DFP, smart ad server system, whatever. But on the SSP side, it timed out. So we cast that aside and invalidate it, and that's a big cause of discrepancies that we've seen.
What is the impression timeout? Is it 30 seconds?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you're working with, but it's between 30 and 60 seconds, and it's definitely an issue we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, the less time the better. I mean, we like to say that, like, you know, we should get that impression when that neural is fired back to us should be basically simultaneous. Like, there shouldn't be any latency. So I mean, I wouldn't plan on 30 seconds, or I would just, you know, try to make it as simultaneous as possible.
Yeah, I think that's something that, you know, a lot of publishers have kind of, maybe like they've heard from like one of our reps, you know, a specific time. And I think in general, like that time is really not super effective to know exactly when a bid's going to expire, because there's so much time between when the request is sent and when it actually goes through DFP. I would just say try and get that out instantaneously.
Yeah, ideally, there's a way you can set it up where if you're scrolling down, like the request is triggered on the slot rendering, and that's the ideal setup.
We did have a couple more questions come through. One is, in the header bidding and EBDA world, have optimizations now come to an end? Do publishers now simply have to focus on the best SSPs, demand/demand partners, or do CPM floors still help increase revenue?
That's a
That's a big question.
You know,
Put us on the spot.
that's something that's always changing too. I feel like with you know, these buyers have their own algorithms for determining how much they want to spend on the site, and it really can change from, you know, week to week. So setting floors is sometimes beneficial, what we've seen, but a lot of times it's really not. So you know, that's something that's a big focus for us from a data perspective. But that's another one where, as publishers, you guys have great opinions on that as well, and we'd love to hear more from you guys.
I think also that we've been talking a lot over the past couple of weeks about, now that header bidding is becoming more widespread and more people have implemented it initially, we can really start to dig in deeper to our specific transaction flow, just making sure that it's as optimized as possible, and maybe not building out an entirely brand new header bidding solution that will change the world of advertising so much, as really focusing in on every single transaction that we make and ensuring that everything is syncing properly and we're receiving all of the bids or the requests the way that we should be, and just making sure that all of our little screws are tightened well. Terrible metaphor.
Got a screw loose.
And if you think about the DFP auction too, like the pre-bid line or the pre-bid winner gets sent into another auction essentially in DFP. So, you know, whatever you have set as CPMs for your direct deals or your price priority waterfall, or even AdSense if you're setting a CPM for that, those are all going to dictate what the floor needs to be effective for header bidding. Like, especially that waterfall, you know, whatever your first look is running at, it's getting sent to DFP at pretty much every time. So you're going to want a floor that is close to that. So because if we're coming in below that for header bidding, it's just not even going to have a shot.
And we have one kind of general question that came through. And the person said we may have answered this already, but what are some of the biggest pitfalls that publishers experience when trying to implement header bidding? What suggestions do you have for a newbie publisher wanting header bidding?
Well, the more straightforward that your website is built, the easier it is to implement header bidding. So if your site is loading dynamically and you're using, you know, like Angular or something like that, it's going to be a lot more complex. So it depends on the site. Common pitfalls.
I would agree, like trying to be too complicated, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's hard for people that make websites to think that like a code is better when it's not totally modularized and simplified. But with header bidding code, I think sticking to what's in the spec, sticking to a wrapper that works is really important, because having that baseline of like, oh, this has worked on hundreds of sites, thousands of sites, versus like, oh, this is something that I put together based on the spec. It's better because I can implement this configuration like JSON object or database that controls all the partners or whatever. But I think getting that set up right with like a spec kind of simple setup is really important.
Yeah, one of the pitfalls I've seen implementing header bidding is competing line items in DFP. So like I've implemented a few where our fill rate's been at 0%, and header bidding fill rates are naturally low just because you're requesting every single page load, as opposed to waterfall where it's just if you're called. But if you have like direct deals, or if you still have waterfall line items competing on the ad units that you have header bidding running on, and if the rate you set on those competing line items is higher than the bid coming in from header bidding, then it's possible for that line item to override the header bidding bid, and it's quite possible that that line item will end up serving a lower CPM than the header bidding ad unit, because the rate set on a DFP line item is kind of just your best guess based off historical data. So that's a pitfall I've seen before, specifically.
I think you just have to be open to testing. Like, it's going to take a while for things to set in. It's going to take a while for us to realize, how complicated the setup is, and just there's troubleshooting that we might have to work through for a couple weeks or whatever it is. I think that just being able and open to testing different partners, different setups, different kind of timeouts on different pages. I mean, just being open to that and realizing that maybe it won't take immediately.
If you have some extra time and you have a test page, like, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think some publishers come to us and they're like, we need to increase yield like right now. That's why we're going with header bidding. And I think to Anna's point, that's just not how it works. Generally, a lot of times there is kind of that friction when it does get on the page where you need to kind of get everything adjusted. Because it's a big time change to the ad stack.
Okay. Next question. From Sovrn's point of view, what are the benefits and drawbacks of using DFP over other popular ad servers such as Smart Ad Server? I think that's a really loaded question. I think that DFP has become so universal that it's kind of the lay of the land at this point in a lot of different ways. There's so much documentation on it.
Yeah.
There's so many other people who are using it that it's easy to find other references. At the same time, people at DFP can be difficult to get a hold of at times. There's some documentation that is kind of tricky to manipulate for a third-party user or an SSP or something like that. So I've talked to a couple different publishers who are moving to Smart or are using a different kind of ad server. I think that DFP allows you to do a lot of different things, almost to the point where it's really difficult to understand at times, because there are so many different options that you can take, and overcomplicating your DFP setup can really mess with overall performance. But DFP kind of does have everything that you need, and I guess it's just kind of what we've used most and what we're most comfortable with.
And what the ad tech general public is familiar with. I think a lot of times those questions are kind of scale based, where if a publisher is big enough where you're getting that consultation from that ad server or company that's helping you implement like a no ad server configuration, like go for it. Like we see a lot of people do that, but as a general website, the most open support is for DFP. Everything runs on DFP, so I think it's a great place to start.
We got one more question. So John asks, can you talk about a few common mistakes that publishers can make, or maybe more importantly, a few things that successful publishers do that improve fill and yield? More like an optimization type question.
I like that. I like how he turned it from, mistakes to like path to success. I think that's kind of a funny, it is different semantics. What Michael said about optimizing the bid request, I think is really important there. Making the right calls. At the same time, it's not just about, minimizing calls too. Having multiple size options for a given ad unit is a great way to optimize fill. Like if you can serve 3 different sizes into a leaderboard, then you can see which one has the highest CPM. Kind of have an auction within an auction there.
Sure.
Splitting out text geos, just.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
I think in general, just a publisher that is willing to kind of go with the spec and do things in a way that is cohesive with the wrapper that they're using, but at the same time taking a look at the code and understanding how it works. That's going to be better than trying to navigate this on your own and try and write it from the pre-bid API calls or something like that.
And that's a really cool question to ask, because we're right in the middle of a best practices audit right now, to where we're looking at our 100 best performing AIH sites and looking for best practices that we could then share with our publishers. So perhaps on our next AMA, we'll have some more tips.
Like making sure that your setup is up to date, that you're working to build out and test different kinds of partners. Different partners are gonna,
Testing.
John asked, he followed up with, is scarcity, meaning like less ads per page, a good strategy given that viewability metrics can matter?
I think that's a really good point. Viewability is something that, we just had that meeting with data science where they were talking to us about viewability. It's another thing like Ads.txt where the metrics are so kind of like, then once there's more metrics, there'll be a lot more tangible ways to identify that. But, testing there and seeing if viewability affects spend on your site is a great idea, because, there's enough data to point to the fact that if a user can see the ad and is engaged with the site, that they're going to be more inclined to spend on that ad. So.
And it's a better user experience.
Mm-hmm,
yeah, and you don't want a busier page with like 10 or 15 ad units on it. We actually, a step in our site audit process is to count the amount of ad units that load on a page. And I'm not sure what that number is now, but it used to be like 6. And if you had more than that, we wouldn't accept you into our publisher network. But it might be more than that now. But has huge implications on site performance.
And then we also got, does the ad position affect the CPM and fill rate? So do ads higher up in the page? So talking about viewability, I guess. Again.
Yeah, and I think that making sure to split out your tags above the folds and below the folds, just getting more granular. You kind of talked about geo-targeting, but also just viewability targeting is really important as well. Your 728 by 90 leaderboard is going to perform better than probably your 728 by 90 at the very bottom of the page. So just making sure that you have everything broken out specifically for what's most viewable. And I guess that kind of leads into like your best sized ad units that we were kind of talking about lately. We can kind of focus on that too, but we talked a lot about 728 by 90s, 300 by 250s, and 160 by 600s are going to be some of your top performing ad units regardless of viewability metrics.
And there's a field in the bid request that we send to DSPs that indicates whether the request is above the fold or below the fold. And we see much higher bid rates and bid values for above the fold. So they know.
They know.
They know.
Cool. Do we have any other main questions that came up?
I think we're to the.
So
Roundtable
I thought this
Yeah,
was a good one that comes up a lot, like on email chains and stuff. And I think it's a great thing to get us this before we start implementation. What is the necessary and optimal information to provide us to complete the implementation correctly and quickly? What do you guys think there?
I mean, we have like a list.
I could read the list right here.
Yeah. But I mean, it's all good stuff. So,
DFP access?
yeah.
Yeah, that's the most important is we need admin DFP access just so we can create your line items quickly because we usually create around 2,000 so we can get more granular with the setups. That's the most important thing to start the whole process.
What does the granularity help with?
The granularity? Well, we do penny line items and a lot of people break it out by like 10-cent line items because it means they have to make less line items, you know, because you don't want to spend 5 hours creating 2,000 line items. It's mind-numbing and it's boring. But if you have penny line items, then you don't have to round down the bids that come in through the wrapper. And like at scale, like you're adding, you know, pennies onto each transaction that's happening and you're just gonna make more money. And that's the reason we do penny line items and make so many in your account.
I think that goes back to the question before of having 2 separate DSP accounts, creating 2,000 line items for every individual site or however you decide to break it out. It is a lot of work and it takes a decent chunk of time. So just making sure that you're optimizing your time as best you can.
Yeah.
What else do you guys need for
A mapping of the ad units to the tag IDs on the page, sort of like a site map, if you will, of the ad units.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that can be the biggest time reducer for us is if you can send us over like a list of the ad units you're using on each page. If there is multiple pages, you know, the breakpoint that you're using for switching between device types in the code. Those 2 things in particular will really get it moving faster because then we can just kind of plug those in. Whereas if that information is hard to provide, you know, we can go to the page and try and find that information, but a lot of times it can be difficult. There's a lot more back and forth, like, oh, this is what I see, like, does this sound correct? Whereas if you can just provide that, then, you know, I think that really helps.
I think that's about all on that question, right? Do we want to do one more?
do you guys? Yeah, 2 minutes.
The next question on here is about the analytics adapter.
Oh,
Can I
yeah.
talk a little bit
So,
about that? Ted's been working a lot with that.
one thing that we've heard publishers ask, what does an analytics adapter do? Is this an offering that is on Sovrn's radar? Analytics adapter for pre-bid is essentially something that collects data about the auction directly after it completes, as it's right before it's being sent to DFP, grabs that information, stores it in some kind of database. And then, you know, if it's an ad partner like us, then we can kind of connect that with our other data to hopefully give you some actionable metrics. So yeah, that is something that we're definitely working on right now. We have a small subset of publishers that are testing out the adapter in beta. A lot of it right now is figuring out how to properly package that data, get you guys what you need to make decisions that you could actually do. You know, like a lot of this information can be so cumbersome and overwhelming that you like what about it is actually going to help you make decisions. So I think that's a great point to kind of leave it off at, is like knowing what you guys think would be really great aspects of the data to make those kind of decisions. You know, like, is my timeout too low? Should I break out international traffic? Should I break out by device type? You know, those kind of questions are the ones that are really going to help us help you. So, yeah.
Cool. Last question. Just like for everyone's knowledge, how do you implement this pre-bid analytics adapter? Is it simple?
Yeah, I mean, so it depends on which one you're using. A lot of them you can just plug in directly to the config as like an analytics adapter. Ours right now is just an extra script tag and then just a little hook in the pre-bid code. So it's really 2 lines of code there. The one calls our endpoint that stores the data, and then the other hook actually just grabs that information, packages it up, and sends it over. So.
Where are we at with our product?
We have it, you know, it works, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that we are trying to figure out with the data. So it's kind of right now at a point where, you know, if you think that, you know, you'd be a good opportunity to test things out, let us know. But I think we want to get it to a point where we can really give publishers a finished product in terms of the stats. Before we really introduce it to the world.
Cool.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, guys, thanks for listening. I hope you guys got as much out of this as we enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
Ask more questions in the community.
Yeah, if you have any more questions, please direct them to community.sovrn.com. We will get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks, guys.